Good morning from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for the second day of the Global Energy Forum, convened in coordination with Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. The next 2 days will continue to feature events and discussions on energy and foreign policy issues across the world and the industry. This morning, we start in Southeast Asia with our partners in Singapore, and throughout the day, we will move to the Middle East, Europe, and back to the United States. Of note, we will take a break in our programming and live stream the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden. We hope you will join us for this historical moment and a fast-thinking analysis directly following. Throughout the rest of the day, conversations about the path to net zero, energy access, and innovation. Please stay tuned through the conference app or the Atlantic Council Twitter and YouTube channel. With that, I would like to shift to introduce our first panel of the day, Asia's in the energy transition. We are pleased to host this discussion with Singapore International Energy Week. The Singapore International, organized by the Energy Market Authority of Singapore, is an annual platform for energy professionals, policymakers, and commentators to discuss and share best practices and solutions within the global energy space. SIEW 2021 will be held from the 25th to the 29th of October at the Marina Bay Sands. We hope your calendar and join us there. Our discussion today will begin with a keynote address from Director General for Electricity, Rita Mulyana, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources from the Republic of Indonesia. Director General, it's my pleasure to welcome you.
Thank you, Ms. Margaret. Thank you for introducing me and allow me to deliver my minister's speech in this event from His Excellency Mr. Arifin Tasrif. And for that, well, I shall start. Honorable Chairman and Speakers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from Jakarta, Indonesia. To begin, please allow me to convey my highest appreciation to Atlantic Council and Minister of Energy and Infrastructure of United Arab Emirates for initiating and inviting me in this virtual meeting. It is indeed a great honor for me to be one of the key participants in this forum, and I sincerely hope that we can have an enlightening discussion on the 5th Atlantic Council Global Energy Forum, especially in the session on Asia energy transition to net zero. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, currently, Indonesia is still dominated by fossil fuel or fossil energy. The dependence on fossil is one of a great challenge for the government in strengthening national energy security as well as in facing the national economic issues, especially imported energy such as crude oil, LPG, and fuel products. Energy is no longer viewed as a mere commodity, but it has now considered as the driver of economic growth. That is why the government of Indonesia has always been in the best effort to provide energy security to the people, as well as guarantee the availability, the accessibility, affordability, and acceptability. Thus, to assure energy stability and security in the long term, our challenge is to promote renewable energy and energy efficiency as a critical tool. Indonesia is blessed with enormous renewable energy sources. The potential for renewable energy for almost 420 gigawatts is spreading almost all over the area in Indonesia, while the utilization currently is as much as 10 gigawatts, or approximately 2.5%. This means that the opportunity is vastly open for potential future developers. On the other hand, within these last 2 years, the realization of installed capacity tend to increase due to the decrease of solar and wind technology cost. We no longer view intermittency as a problem for technology supporting the renewable energy power plant could be a base load or bigger. We need to act and start early to maximize the implementation of renewable energy for the prosperity of the people to fulfill our energy needs. We should use less fossil energy and start to use clean energy. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, for environmental measures, Indonesia committed to reduce greenhouse gas emission for 29% from business as usual by 2030 and 41% by conditional mitigation scenario. Renewable energy play an important role not only in combating climate change issues through mitigation action for greenhouse gas emission reduction, but also in encouraging economic recovery, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, for sustainable economic development. Renewable energy development is the measure needed for undertaking the energy transition to a more sustainable future. The government is now having effort to achieve the renewable energy target of 23% by 25. As for the new share of renewable energy has only reached 11.3% of the total energy mix. In order to ensure the renewable energy target are attainable toward energy transition, the government continue to implement several programs. Among others, number one, increasing renewable energy installed capacity in electricity generation by focusing on solar power plant. Number two, substituting fossil fuel with biofuel for vehicle and industry. Indonesia has been implementing a national mandatory biodiesel or biodiesel for B30. In relation to this biofuel-related initiative, Indonesia is keen to moving forward by starting to develop green refineries to produce a variety of green fuel. Number three, biomass development program. We are preparing co-firing using waste-based pellet in existing coal-fired power plant and reduce derived fuel or RDF utilization. And number four, fossil primary energy conversion, diesel power plant or retiring age of coal-fired power plant shall be replaced by renewable energy power plants. And number five, non-electricity or non-biofuel utilization, such as briquette, agriculture product drying, and biogas. Number six, the acceleration of the battery-based electric motor vehicle program for road transportation. This program could reduce the dependency of on fuel import and increasing local energy use for power generation, especially renewable energy. And the seventh is providing incentive both fiscal and non-fiscal as well as simplifying the licensing process. To maintain the positive investment and business activity in the renewable energy sector, the government of Indonesia is currently preparing a new presidential regulation on renewable business, which incorporate competitive market mechanism and feed-in tariff implementation. The government is also on progress of drafting a grand strategy energy for the development of energy sector to achieve ideal target in terms of energy security, energy mix, emission reduction, and future economic impact. The grand strategy emphasizes the strategy to meet national energy demand, to improve the trade balance, and the developing energy infrastructure. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Asia is considered as the fastest-growing region. Its continued economic growth and rising standard of living so impact to the increasing energy demand, while generally depend on fossil fuel import. However, during the COVID-19 pandemic, all economic sectors are experiencing tough situation, including energy. As we all have seen within the last month, global demand of energy is decreasing due to the isolation and lockdown. This hard situation we face today should be our momentum to promote energy transition to renewable energy and energy efficiency development. Renewable energy and energy efficiency shall play a key role of post-COVID-19 plan and assure energy security in the long term, a secure supply and assure energy security in the long term. A secure supply and energy and affordable energy access will help the global economic recovery. Asia countries need creating policy to improve and accelerate the energy transition movement, such as providing incentive for renewable energy investment, creating transparent pricing and other regulation that could encourage clean energy development. In this regard, support from other countries. Sorry. In this regard, support from other countries that have well experience in the field of energy system, policy planning, capacity building, project support, including technical assistance and project finance, will be greatly beneficial in aiding Asia effort to strengthen renewable energy business as well as the economy. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, to implement energy transition is certainly not an easy job, but with commitment, consistency, and cooperation, I do believe that this target is not impossible to achieve. We are looking forward to strengthening partnership with all partner countries to utilize energy transition business opportunity in Indonesia. In the global situation pandemic, this is an excellent time to enhance global partnership among countries and international organizations for integrating cleaner energy transition in economic recovery program. Thank you, Minister of Energy and Environmental Resources Indonesia, Mr. Arifin Tasrif. Back to you, Margaret.
Thank you so much, Director General, for giving that speech on behalf of His Excellency. We do appreciate you joining us today. I think you set the stage for a great panel discussion talking about energy security and cooperation. As you mentioned, Asia is one of the most dynamic and vibrant areas of the world, home to the most populous nations and some of the largest economies. It's also a very diverse region with different energy demand needs. And today I'm delighted to introduce this distinguished panel of experts who have decades of experience in the energy industry, policy, and also finance. First, we have Mr. Allard Nooy, Chief Executive Officer of Infraco Asia Development, Mr. Beni Suryadi, Manager of Power, Fossil Fuels, Alternative Energy and Storage from the ASEAN Center for Energy, Mr. Toyoda Masakazu, Chairman and CEO, Institute of Energy Economics, Japan, and Dr. Zhai Yongping, Chief of the Energy Sector Group, Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department of the Asia Development Bank. It's my pleasure again to welcome you all to the Global Energy Forum. Before we start, I would just like to remind the audience that they can submit questions through the conference application SIEW. I'd like to present the first question to Allard. We were just hearing from Director General about a specific situation in Indonesia, but I'd like to zoom out and ask you, because your company really works across the region and also South and Southeast Asia, could you give us a general overview of the energy situation and maybe perhaps talk about some of the risks to energy supplies and how partners again can work together to mitigate that?
Thank you, Margaret, and thank you for SIEW and the Atlantic Council for having me as a panelist. I would like to request the technical support team for hosting the slides. I've got a couple of slides as part of the introductory remarks. Next slide, please. So this is part of the International Energy Week and as well as the Atlantic Council Cooperation webinar, Asia's Role in Energy Transition. Next slide, please. As the Director General of the Ministry of Energy in Indonesia just said, the ASEAN countries in particular are making great inroads in the development of renewable energy as part of their energy mix. And this slide shows you where those very asset subclasses are basically are being utilized in Indonesia. In Indonesia alone, 11% comes currently out of renewable energy. but they have set themselves very aggressive targets. The majority of that 11% currently comes out of hydro. And the same applies to various other countries across the region, a proportion of renewable energy in the total mix. Not surprisingly, hydro has been around as a technology for over 100 years, whereas solar and wind are more developed in the recent past. In terms of the energy consumption by sector in Southeast Asia alone, the industry makes up about 40% of total energy consumption. And due to the pandemic and COVID-19, that has actually reduced. Residential consumption makes up about 31% of the total, whereas commercial and the service industry are consuming about 24%. If you look at the left-hand side on this slide, Eastern Asia and Southeast Asia are not doing too bad in comparison to other parts of the world, in particularly in comparison to Europe, as well as in comparison to Northern America. Next slide, please. The ASEAN countries in particular have set some very aggressive targets for themselves as part of the overall ASEAN agreements to basically increase their total energy generation mix out of renewable energy. Remarkably, Indonesia has set themselves 23% by the year of 2025, whereas Thailand has set themselves an even more aggressive target by 2036, of which 40% will be coming out of the energy generation in terms of renewables. Vietnam has increasingly, over the last few years, with a legislative framework around feed-in tariffs, set themselves targets by 7%, which they've actually outperformed last year in terms of the total energy mix. And the next slide, please, and that's the end of the slides. Coming back to your initial question, Margaret, let me link climate change with the energy situation. Many Asian countries have a high vulnerability to heat waves, flooding, and sea level rise. Unless clear action is taken now to decarbonize our economies, 250 million people will be subject to coastal flooding by 2050. Mitigation of these risks depend very much on nations and businesses immediately starting to pursue decarbonization strategies. Many governments in this part of the world now recognize this. This can be clearly seen in a flurry of recent announcements to reach carbon neutrality, and investors are also increasingly focused on ESG performance, in particular the E as part of the ESG. Recent surveys indicate that around 75% would consider or walk away from investment based on climate risk. So what can Asian markets do to reduce the supply risk? The rising risk to future supply should be a catalyst for change. Power generation and transportation are key sectors. Power in Asia could see 1.5 trillion of investments over the next coming 10 years. Solar and wind will likely make up 2/3 of this. And for this to happen, investment sentiment must continue to swing away from the reliance on low-cost coal towards more sustainable and greener future. The rollout of electrification in the transport sector will also be critical. Electrical vehicles, e-bikes, through the longer-term use of green hydrogen in trucking can also help reduce Asia's oil import dependency and will reduce air pollution and carbon emission. So what is required to see this happen? It's a combination of policy, innovation, and investment, as far as I'm concerned. Asia needs to become a leader in new technology and not just a follower. Across the energy space, Asia has historically followed trends set elsewhere. Japan was an LNG pioneer, but overall gas penetration remains very low across Asia. Lastly, renewables' current share of Asia's power generation mix, as I highlighted in the previous slides, is still below the world average, but less than half the level in Europe. But countries setting themselves aggressive targets. To be a leader in decarbonization, Asian governments and companies must achieve first mover advantage in nascent technologies, and we are seeing some steps towards this. Japan and South Korea are working to create future hydrogen societies, and China is aiming to be a world leader in carbon capture, uses and storage. Rising investments in technologies for green manufacturing and recycling could establish a circular economy in Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much again for giving us that broad overview. I do appreciate it. And we want to continue that and dive a little bit deeper on some of the things you brought up. So with that, Beni, I'd like to come over to you because I know you were one of the authors of the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook. And perhaps you could elaborate on where Allard left off in terms of what it really takes to bring these diverse countries together to agree on certain targets and certain goals. So if you could speak to the diversity of the region and how countries are cooperating and what that process looks like from your end, I think that would be really great for our audience to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Yeah, as a start, for any of you who are not familiar with the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook, it's an official study by the ASEAN Center for Energy, which was endorsed at the 38th ASEAN Minister on Energy meeting, the highest level of the energy cooperation meeting in the Southeast Asia region, November last year. It was jointly developed with the official and energy expert from all of 10 countries in the region, as this reflects the country's desire to understand the current energy landscape and also to explore different opportunity and possibility as a nation, as well as part of the regional cooperation from today to 2040s. Southeast Asia region, or commonly referred as ASEAN, is home to almost 650 million peoples and have a combined GDP of more than 7 trillion US dollars. The region, which is shift from agriculture sector into industrialization, is becoming one of the global growth driver and important economic force in the world. It's a diverse group, but collectively a growing economic force. Even after accounting for the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the region GDP is still projected to nearly triple by 2040s. Fueling that growth will require a significant amount of energy. This will lead to a significant rise in energy demand. Today, I mean, as DG from Indonesia mentioned that Indonesia is relying too heavily on the fossil fuels. Many countries in the region still depend heavily on the fossil fuels for their energy mix, in particular oil, natural gas, and coal. In all scenarios that we were modeled in the Outlook 6 until 2040, fossil fuels continue to provide the majority of the energy mix. So in this context, however, the countries in the region have made a commitment towards sustainable energy, both at national level and regional level, as Allard has already mentioned, on specific countries. Key choice will determine the size and makeup of the ASEAN future energy, because as the energy demand is evolving, policy choice can shape it further. Renewable energy is crucial because it can provide a significant share of electricity, but enabling measures are the key, and the integration and collaboration among the countries is crucial to harness this potential. Energy efficiency is also a tremendous topic focus for ASEAN. We surpassed our previous target and now sets to higher level and create further energy efficiency and conservation efforts. Yes, substantial investment is required and it needs to be covered by every countries in the region. But from the finding, we also identify that it will provide multiplier benefit for the region. collectively create a benefit for all the country, be it creating jobs or reduce the social cost of energy. I stop there. Thank you very much, Maggie.
Thanks. You ended on the perfect note to turn it over to Dr. Zhai. We've been talking about the fact that the pandemic has impacted finance flows, and a lot of that money is going again towards public health. So from your perspective at ADB, how are you helping drive the clean energy transition across the region and overcome some of these really seemingly insurmountable challenges to again shift away from a kind of path dependency on fossil fuels and create a new path for renewable energy and other low carbon sources?
Yeah, thank you, Margaret, for the question. I'm coming from Asian Development Bank. So first of all, we are a bank that provide financing. Last year in 2020, we provided $4.2 billion to the energy sector. If I look at this 4.2 billion, and about half of which are going to renewable energy. So we are supporting the green, even during the pandemic, we continue to support very strongly renewable energy. Now, the other half, basically, we are supporting transmission distribution system that would integrate the renewable energy. I just mentioned that we have to make sure that the renewable energy is taken into the grid safely, and they can play a role. Actually, during the pandemic, the renewable energy we have seen in many countries is doing very well. The share of renewable energy has increased in spite of overall decline in the demand. So renewable energy is making a good case in many ways that during the pandemic. So we are very convinced that this should be continued. ADB should continue to support the green recovery along the same lines, because the portfolio I just mentioned actually corresponds to the two challenges the region is facing, as previous speakers have mentioned. One is access, energy access remain an issue. Electrification, we are close to 94% overall in Asia. That's good. But in terms of clean cooking and heating, we're only at the level of 50%. And this is a source of indoor pollution. And sometimes this health impact is actually worse than the COVID-19. The indoor pollution related to the use of traditional fuels in cooking, for cooking and heating in some countries. So when we talk about the recovery, green recovery, we want to make sure that the green recovery is green for sure, but also people focus. We have to make sure that our support in Asia should bring the people's living standard up and using more renewable energy that's clean, but also actually renewable energy is more labor intensive. It can create also jobs. So it's a good combination here. In terms of specific support to in fighting this COVID-19, of course, ADB as a bank overall provided budget support to many Asian countries, but in the energy sector specifically, we provided some financial support to some utilities that are suffering from cash flow problem, because some energy utilities suffered from actually loss of revenue because decline in demand, but also collection of revenue is an issue when the whole the lockdown is in place. So ADB provided some emergency support to some utilities. That's one way. The other one, we have started a pilot experiments, actually a pilot project to make sure that looking at during the pandemic, the air conditioning system will not become a source of transmission, making sure that air conditioning system is safe in hygiene dimension, but also energy efficient. So we launched a pilot project in making sure that the air conditioner is safe and also efficient. And we also started looking at the cold chain, how renewable energy can support the cold chain that is necessary to send the vaccine to remote areas and rural areas. So these are some of the things we are doing during this pandemic. But overall, I think we should remain focused in meeting the dual challenges. One is energy access, particularly for clean cooking, and also for climate mitigation and adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Those were really excellent examples, and I do appreciate you sharing that. And I will come back to you on some of the other finance questions. But first, I would like to go to Toyoda-san. We've talked a lot about Southeast Asia and South Asia to a certain extent, and you're here from Tokyo, and Japan is one of the leaders, obviously, with the announcement of Prime Minister Suga for carbon neutrality. So perhaps you could speak about what that means both for Japan and the region. But because we've talked a lot about technology and the need for innovation, perhaps you could also talk about the need for how we could regional partners could cooperate around technology innovation and really drive them to scale and maybe do technology transfer and co-investment or whatever you propose. I would love to hear from you about that as well.
Margaret, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk about Japanese energy policy. It is through Prime Minister Suga declared to aim at carbon neutrality, net carbon neutrality by 2050. Japanese government under Abe government, they used to commit only 80% deduction by 2050. And now Prime Minister Suga declared to make it zero carbon by 2050. It's a very ambitious target. I don't think it's easy to realize, but with every effort of government and industry, I don't think it is impossible. And the question is how we could make it. The METI Ministers Advisory Organ is going on their discussion. I'm a member of that committee, and so far we have a very rough idea about how we can make it. First, we have to make the best use of existing zero carbon energy, so renewable energy, which everybody talked about. We have to maximize the use of renewable energy, particularly solar and wind. In addition to that, we try to keep at least the nuclear energy, which is also zero carbon. But we don't think they are sufficient. And so we think you have to think about hydrogen ammonia, particularly from fossil fuel with CCS. Yes, green ammonia, green hydrogen is welcome, but so far it appears to be cheaper. I mean, hydrogen or ammonia from fossil fuel with CCS is cheaper, and the cheaper the better. I think that's the point. And so we have three kinds of zero carbon energy. In addition to renewable energy, nuclear, we have now decarbonized ammonia and hydrogen from fossil fuel. In addition to that, we have to clearly, on the demand side, we have to promote energy conservation, and also with respect to transportation sector, Prime Minister Suga also declared that we have to accelerate electrification, and by 2035, perhaps we have to make all the vehicle only with electrification. Electrification means not only EV, but hydrogen, automobile FCB. And so by that, we try to make our energy system zero carbon, but perhaps for industry, it is not easy. Again, they try to maximum use of hydrogen, but in addition to that, we are trying to develop somehow carbon recycling technology. You might not have heard so often, but one good example is CO2 absorbing type of cement. Cement is cement. It emits quite a lot of CO2, but we could reduce the CO2 by reducing the use of cement, but instead of cement, we could use something else, like clean coal, etc., clean coal ash, etc., etc. And also, cement can absorb CO2. And eventually, this could lead to negative emission cement. We are trying to develop such a technology, and so with those new technology developed, we are hoping that we could realize the zero carbon energy system by 2050. And Margaret-san, you pointed out the importance of collaboration, regional collaboration. Yes, Japanese companies have a lot of supply chain in Asia, and we are working together, and we are trying to technology transfer quite a lot, and we believe that we can produce zero carbon hydrogen ammonia here in Asia. Indonesia or Brunei, Malaysia, they produce gas quite a lot, and instead of gas, they could produce ammonia or hydrogen and export to Japan. And they have a lot of sites for CCS, and so Japanese industry is also developing the CCS technology, and so we can work together. Gas producing country, gas importing country can now hydrogen producing country, hydrogen importing country, and also clearly in Asia still coal matters a lot, and coal-fired plant can be more eco-friendly by mixing with zero carbon ammonia, and so it's a co-burning. And so, et cetera, et cetera. We have a lot of new technology, and we can be happy to provide the technology, and we can work together and produce zero carbon energy, and we can import, export, and eventually we could have a more eco-friendly Asia, and particularly Northeast Asia, China, Korea, and Japan. We are trying to decarbonize the whole energy system by mid 21st century, and so hopefully we could enjoy our energy technology transfer to Asia country, and eventually at certain point we are hoping that we could decarbonize Asia. That's what we are thinking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Toyoda-san. And then I do want to kind of turn this question back to our other panelists, because I do think the challenge, as you laid out, is Japan is already a fairly developed country. Your emissions have really plateaued, but the rest of Asia, a lot of the rest of Asia is still dealing with growth, as Beni talked about. So how can some countries that are still heavily reliant on fossil fuels, that don't necessarily have the financial means that Japan might have, really work to decarbonize even some of those heavy industry sectors? Allard, I know you have some examples of renewable energy development that you've worked on. You also can talk about technology and innovation. So I think I would like to start with you and then go to Beni and then Dr. Zhai about this, really answering this question. How can we rapidly scale these technologies to make sure that not only Japan can reach carbon neutrality by mid-century, but also other developing countries in the region?
Thank you, Maggie. Well, first and foremost, during the pandemic and the various lockdowns, we at Infraco Asia have faced some challenges in particularly further enlarging our portfolio in the renewables. And this has to do with basically delay in project approvals, mobilization of contractors, and issues around the supply chain. At Infraco Asia, and we are a donor-funded organization through our parent company, PIDG, the Private Infrastructure Development Group. We're operating in 12 countries in South and Southeast Asia. We're currently in 40 plus project joint ventures, but about 60% of our investments are actually in the renewable energy space. This is across various different subsectors. So it's run-of-river hydro, it's solar and wind. While we were in lockdown and in Myanmar specifically, for instance, we had a mini grid under construction in Makwe State. And although factories in China had reopened, the border restrictions and controls were causing delay in delivery of some of those components to site. In the same state, we're actually developing a utility scale wind power project, 260 megawatt, where we have already 5 test towers up and we prove to be commercially viable. If I turn to wind and solar technologies, we've seen a few important developments in the last few years. Solar and potential battery storage have become much cheaper and efficiency has also improved. And with hybrid solutions, in particularly solar and battery, the intermittency has also improved. The other complementary aspect between solar and wind is, and we've proven this in a number of countries in Southeast Asia where we have significant investments in the renewable energy space. The wind usually blows harder in the early morning and later in the evening, and that complements solar, which obviously relies on the sun during the day quite nicely. With regards to wind, let me give you an example. We developed 2 wind power projects, and these were the very first project-financed wind power projects in Sindh province in Pakistan. This is 100 megawatt, so ultimately it was built on 40 towers with 2.5 megawatt installed capacity turbines per tower. Became operational in 2015. If we would do that project today, we would probably install double the capacity per tower, so close to 5 megawatt, and at a much lower cost. And then lastly, in certain countries, renewable energy tariffs are now either on or close to par with thermal power generation, and that provides a great deal of opportunities.
Thank you so much. And again, I want to give Beni and Dr. Zhai the chance to follow up here. We did have a question come in from the audience about coal finance, and just following up on the example that you gave, Allard, you're talking about how renewable energy is now essentially cost competitive, and that coal potentially could be a stranded asset in the next decade or so. So if you could start there, Beni, I think that would be an interesting question for our audience. And I know it's one of the biggest challenges your region faces.
Right. Thank you, Maggie. That's yeah, it's a good point. Starting with the coal financing, just to highlight that today's spectrum, that coal is a major part of energy mix, the power mix in many of the countries in the region. And it's most of it, I mean, we still see a young coal. I mean, it's going to be a fleet that will be expected to be there in the next 10 or 20 years ahead. So it's not an easy issue to be addressed by a region with the current situation. So the idea is how to really utilize it effectively on the existing asset that we have. Dr. Zhai maybe will be able to address more on the financing issue, but in the context of ASEAN, we are a diverse region. We are 10 countries with its own complexity. The complexity of the situation is further heightening with the need to also achieve multiple policy aims at once on energy and other priorities. And the energy policy choice made by each country will not only determine the sustainability of this country's economy, but also have the implication for the region and for the world. So in addressing this issue, again, that's going to be the innovation. It's expected to be a central element in every area of, for us, in particular, 10 countries in the region are working together, in particular on the energy cooperation, driving this technology issue, the financial issue to support our development. So these two words are highlighted, the cooperation or working together and the innovation. These two words are perfectly translated in under our recent regional blueprint document, the latest version that was launched at the ministerial meeting last November. The blueprint that covers the energy cooperation in ASEAN for the period 2021-2025 as part of the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint. This ASEAN Energy Blueprint highlighting the sub-theme that accelerating the energy transition and strengthening the energy resilience through greater innovation and cooperation. So it frames the energy cooperation agenda through highlighting this innovation. One practical example on this innovation is like on the regional capability to produce a crucial renewable energy technology such as a solar PV. We have Malaysia, we have Thailand, we have Vietnam, who are already acknowledged globally in the solar PV component production and assembly. So regional collaboration might enhance this kind of production and innovation. So in turn, it could encourage the development of mechanisms such as others issues on the virtual net energy mentoring or the peer-to-peers. But this innovation will assist ASEAN in embracing renewable technology faster. And on cooperation framework, I think one of it is the regional comprehensive economic partnership, which is just signed, may enhance the low carbon supply chain across the ASEAN countries. Regional capacity building and knowledge transfer through expert sharing will strengthen the research, financial mechanism, the development and innovation on low carbon technology. So this not only will ensure the sustainable development for the region, but will also enhance regional integration. I will stop there. Thank you very much, Margaret.
That's a great answer, and you covered a lot, and thank you for bringing up RCEP. I think that's a very important point. Dr. Zhai, I'd like to come back to you just on the financing of coal question, and also just ask about how ADB views financing of really fossil fuels in general. I know that there's a lot of efforts to create a natural gas market throughout the region, but we're seeing areas of the world like the European Union and European banks start to really look hard at financing of natural gas. What is ADB's perspective, and again, how do you see your role in driving the energy transition away from carbon resources?
Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, ADB has not financed any coal-fired power plant since 2013. So that's the first thing I want to mention. And talking about general, in answering your question, I would like to mention 3 dimensions. The first dimension is a policy dimension in line with the global commitment, Paris Accord, on climate change, climate mitigation that would require us to reconsider any investment in coal, in fossil fuels. So there is a policy decision that has to be made. In that context, ADB is currently reviewing our energy policy. Our energy policy, current policy is dated 2009. So after 11 years, we need to update that policy. So a clear policy position would be spelled out during this process by end of this year. Hopefully before COP26, you will see a new version of energy policy that is clearly aligned with Paris Agreement. So that's first level. The second level, there is also a level of economic dimension. When we invest as a bank, when we invest in any project, that we look at the financial viability, economic viability. If we know coal is no longer viable, solar is cheaper, and nobody would actually invest and taking that risk to invest in coal. So the economic dimension is there for us to actually focusing more on renewable energy instead of power plant like coal. This is the second dimension. Then third dimension is the technology. If we don't do coal, what else? I think previous speakers have mentioned a few technology solutions. Mr. Toyoda has mentioned some solutions for making coal cleaner or low carbon. So I think that in that sense, technology is also important. ADB is supporting our member countries in studying the possibility of carbon capture and storage. So that's one way. The other technologies you ask natural gas, to be clear that actually there has been increasing demand toward ADB for financing natural gas projects because natural gas is less carbon intensive, clearly 50% less than coal for sure. And natural gas is flexible. That can be used to as peaking as base load depending on technologies so that we can support, complement renewable energy. And natural gas actually for the moment is cheaper. It's cheap compared to 5-10 years ago. So there's some momentum for natural gas that ADB has supported a number of natural gas projects. That said, I think same principle I have mentioned, policy level and economic dimension has to be applied for natural gas. If in 5-10 years, we foresee that natural gas asset will become stranded, then we'll have, be careful in to what extent, in which country we can support or not a natural gas project. So, that's what I want to offer at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, you left us on a great point to go over back to Toyoda-san. I'm sure you have quite a few comments based on the conversation, but we also had a question come in from the audience again about how the region can accelerate carbon capture projects and investment. So kind of again, building off of what Dr. Zhai just mentioned, and how can you use CCUS in sectors where it's vital? Toyoda-san, I know Japan is a leader in CCUS technology, but there are still some challenges in scaling and commercializing the technology. So maybe also in addition to your remarks, you can comment on CCUS.
Well, thank you, Margaret. And I think CCS technology is quite important with respect to hydrocarbon use. In Japan, we are developing the technology and CCS technology, and we try to deploy this technology to other countries, including in Asia. And in Japan, we do not have a very good sites. Sites is limited, but in Asia, there are many, and Australia a lot, and even United States a lot, and Middle East a lot. I think here are a lot of opportunity for us to utilize CCS technology. And then what we can do is the easiest way to produce hydrogen is from gas. And so first, perhaps from gas, we could do, produce hydrogen and ammonia. Why ammonia? It's easy to transport. And it's one way of carrier of hydrogen. And so we produce hydrogen and ammonia with CCS and then zero carbon hydrogen, and ammonia would be there. I think in Asia, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Brunei, there are quite a lot. And we have been working very closely with Brunei government, and we are trying to import zero carbon ammonia or hydrogen. And so in Asia, we could utilize this technology. I think Beni-san is right and Zhai-san is right. Technology matters, innovation matters, and even with respect to coal-fired plant, we could make it zero carbon. 3 steps approach. One, we have to improve the most efficient coal-fired plant and at least better than ultra supercritical, and perhaps finance can be allowed only for those very efficient coal-fired plant, and then we could co-burn with ammonia. This is the second step. And so already 20% co-burning with ammonia is easy, and we could increase the share of ammonia. And if you could mix with 50% ammonia, zero carbon ammonia, then the emission from coal-fired plant is almost the same as gas-fired plant. And then the rest, the third step is we could take out CO2. We could utilize CO2 as a mineral or resources. And so this is what Japan is trying to develop this technology, and we could share this technology with Asian countries. If renewable energy is sufficient, if 100% renewable energy is possible, that's fine. But in Asia, unfortunately, solar is okay, but wind power is quite limited. And so I think, depending on the region, depending on the countries, endowment of renewable energy differs. And so if we could utilize CCS technology as a sort of game changer, we could decarbonize the whole hydrocarbon, and then I think Asian countries can enjoy zero carbon society eventually. But that's what we can think.
I see. Thank you very much, Toyoda-san, and I think you gave a very satisfactory answer to our audience's question. Beni, I'm going to give you the last question here, and I'm going to take the moderator's privilege in asking, because it's Inauguration Day here in the United States. We have a new Biden-Harris administration coming in. What are you expecting from them in terms of cooperation around energy in the ASEAN region? And if anyone else wants to comment, please do. But Beni, we can start with you. We're at only a few minutes, so you have to keep it short, please.
Right. Thank you very much, Margaret. We with ASEAN, we just launched the updated work plan that we have to shaping the energy cooperation for ASEAN 2021 to 2025. This 5 years cooperation is not only really addressing the issue for the next 5 years, but also shaping the directive for the ASEAN, for the region until futures. And then what happened in ASEAN, as mentioned earlier, it's not only impacting the ASEAN, but it's also a global context. And to do this is with all the situation that we have, we look for the collaboration and support from all of the partners that we have, including US as one of the strong partners that we have on energy cooperation in ASEAN in various sectors. So we have a solid collaboration with US under our ASEAN-US framework collaboration. And when we look forward to escalate it, to move it faster than before, then we will be able to address the problem that we have today for the better future. I'll stop there. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you very much for ending us on that note. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I know we could continue for another hour, but I do want to say again a big thank you to Director General Mulyana and all of the panelists here for this enlightening discussion. Really, thank you. And as I said earlier, the Atlantic Council is thrilled to work with our colleagues in Singapore, and we look forward to partnering again this fall during Singapore International Energy Week in October. We do hope you all will join us again later this year. Now it's my pleasure to turn over to